So that will bring us into our talk for this evening. We have the great pleasure of having Dave Elphinstone providing us a talk. I've had the privilege of knowing Dave for, I guess, 1986 or somewhere, where he hired me to be a seasonal naturalist under his great tutelage for a couple of years and beyond. So I do have a very much thank Dave for getting me on the right straight, the right route into becoming a kind of a naturalist. So I do appreciate that.
And you
Um,
be.
I just from the bios, there's you could talk at length about Dave. He created for one of the main things for Calgary's natural history. He was a planner for Calgary Parks, created the Natural Areas Management Plan, which is coordinated the management of over 400 natural area parks in the city. He coordinated and started up the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary volunteer program, the Peregrine Falcon program, which I kind of worked under him at. He negotiated with a range developmental industry for the preservation of natural areas, environmental assessments for a bunch of them. He wrote a book, actually. Well, I got a book in my suitcase, or my bookcase back here. Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, A Place for All Season, which is a fabulous book if you want to get a feeling of the ebbs and flows of natural life in Calgary, particularly at the bird sanctuary. It's an award-winning program. The Natural Area Management Program won numerous awards, including the Canadian Municipalities Environmental Achievement Award, and he was lucky to be the recipient of the 2000 Emerald Award for Environmental Achievement. So we're very fortunate to have Dave to present to us tonight, and I thank Dave for coming, and let's see what Dave has to enlighten us with.
Now we'll see if I can get this working.
Great. There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thanks, John. I owe a lot to John as well. I learned quite a bit from him when he worked with us, and I still do. I follow him quite often with what Nature Calgary is doing. My program today is a little bit different than a lot of what people see, and it's about the art of seeing and using photography as well as art or other kinds of art, as well as observation to make yourself feel better. Just before I start, I thought I'd mention about John's, he probably will never tell anybody this, but I think he's the only person in the world that ever got a ticket for trying to save a baby peregrine falcon.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, no worries. He was jaywalking and the police wouldn't let him by. So today, the program is really about sharing my experiences with health as well as photography. And even if you can't do photography, I think this program will be appropriate for you. You can observe and participate in almost any kind of art, whether it's music or whether it's painting or almost anything. It really is about trying to get people to see what's around them a little bit more. And I know most of you being naturalists, you do that already, but there's even some other ways of doing it as well. There's some rules and techniques of appreciation that I found interesting. And really it's how our brain works and making use of that in terms of creating your art, but also appreciating art as well. And probably the most important thing to take away from this is that you each have important individuality. And it's really important to mind that and to start using it wherever and whenever you go somewhere. It will improve your health. It'll improve your observation. It'll allow you to live a lot more in the moment. My background is the probably prime one in the last 10 years has been a medication-induced Parkinson's, which is essentially similar to Parkinson's, only it's supposed to be very short term. And that's what they told me at the time. It would be about a month from having a bit of too much of the medication that I was prescribed. And it's now been almost 10 years since I had it. So much for a month. With that, and any serious issue that people have in terms of their health is depression. I really felt that, especially when I couldn't leave the house and had to just sit and watch TV, which is depressing on its own. We also, then friends pushed me, and even though I was kind of stubborn, to start using a walker or a wheelchair. And so finally someone mentioned about scooter. Well, I took that up, and boy, it changed my life. I was able to get out in the field. So if you see a guy riding around on a tricycle that looks sort of like a scooter, that's probably me. My background also, in terms of taught a lot of nature photography and general nature courses, hiking. I've led lots of tours. I wrote a newspaper column for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember how much. John mentioned the book. I've done a number of photography exhibits. And he also talked a little bit about my background in terms of natural areas. One of the most stressful parts of my job for the last 10 years of it, I stopped in 2008 and went on disability. I also negotiated with developers in terms of trying to protect natural area lands in Calgary, which I feel is so important to our health. But more important than all that past stuff is my hobbies and the activities that I do now. I really worked hard and forced myself to get outside as much as I could. I am learning currently, through the help of a neurological, what do you call it, a physio, to learn to walk again. It's slow and it's difficult, but I'm enjoying every second of it. My photography has meant a lot to me. I used to only be able to, when I first got sick, I could only do car nature photography, which is not very satisfying, but it's still better than nothing. I have a regular routine. I'm swimming a lot and exercising and stretching, and that's also made me feel great. I did a lot of reading. I'm doing less now because of less time, and one of my favorite activities is growing orchids, of which this picture is one of them. It's called Habenaria medusa, as you can see why. And I've also recently, in the last few years, put together this program, The Art of Seeing, which I've been working with Alberta Health Services and Alberta Mental Health to try to give people a chance to how they can get to feel better. These are some of the things that I currently do to try to stay better, and also I did to get better. And that comes from a lot of different sources, from reading and getting help where I needed it. I try to focus on observations and outside thoughts. One of the most important things I learned was to stay away from my negative thoughts and thinking about me, and try to see, no matter where I went, I tried to see something new. When I go swimming, I try to see something new in the swimming pool every time. Or I try to think something new. How can I change my thinking about whatever it is I'm seeing? This will come apparent why I say this a little later, but I try to look sideways or behind me every time I go out, and I'll get to that a little later. When I'm stressed, I really have to try and say, does it really matter? Are people going to know this years and years later? I try to recognize the care also that people have given me, and the healthcare system has been wonderful to me, except for that first little part. But I really appreciate all the friends and stuff that really have supported me more than I supported myself. With mental health, there's very serious issues that, of course, can become fatal. But the main things are sort of the things that take you away from art. Yeah, you have low motivation. You really don't want to leave the house. You don't feel well. you know you're sad, or not sad, but you know you're not feeling the best, everything turns gray, as of the picture here. Things that are used to be beautiful to you don't matter much anymore. They're kind of ugly. Your internal thoughts dominate. You go, why am I sick and everybody's so healthy? There's a loss of trust in your medical people, or in, not so much with friends, that never happened to me, but there's certainly also a stigma. And when you start getting sick, people wonder what's wrong with you and think you're being lazy or whatever. And many people can't work and are unable to find work because of it. It's a very serious illness. For me, photography takes me away from that and allows me to focus on more important things. What I like to look at in terms of this mule deer eye, I'm going to mention the species names as I go through, because I know you're in Nature Calgary. So anyway, one of the things I noticed was it had eyelashes on the top of the eye, but not on the bottom of the eye. Also has whiskers around the eye, which was interesting. We don't seem to have that. But the interesting thing I want you to think about is, while I was describing that, where were your minds? Were they thinking about the bad day you had today, or the things that have gone wrong in the last week, or some of the difficulties everybody goes through? It takes your mind away from those things and puts it on what you're seeing. And that's a really critical part of getting healthy. The art of seeing is to bring out who you are and by what you see. What are your thoughts about what you see? What do you want to show about yourself and the things that you see? This one is an important self-portrait for me, in that as I get older, there's certainly big parts that are starting to fall off. And also young flowers are starting to grow at the top, where I can, as I get older, I'm losing things, but I'm also gaining things. Depression images often makes you feel alone, and others don't always understand how you feel and where you're coming from. People mistake it for just sadness, but you often feel like there's no future, and you certainly get angry at people that don't understand. When you're alive, you see the brightness in eyes and you feel a relative warmth. In this case, it's an ocelot. And when I showed you this picture, I made it up all myself. This is the Calgary Zoo, where they have nice pens and nice open areas and stuff. But when I took the picture, I took the line through its eye to take away its individuality. I put really tight cage, and it just looks sad because of that. I took its personality away. But in this one was also in a very similar pen in the Arizona Desert Museum, or the Tucson Desert Museum. And but he was in the same condition as that lion that I showed you. And that's what we do to ourselves. That's where we put ourselves, depending, and we can make it and take it away as we see fit. And you can do that in photography and art. I wanted to show a depression, and so I tried to take it with knowing what I felt about it. I also wanted to show happiness the same way. So I totally made these two pictures up to not represent what was the reality. Photography and art is about you and your thoughts. And they're not about anybody else's, although we all make mistakes and start thinking about whether other people will like it or not. But to me, on the left is my daughter, about probably 25 years ago. And one of the things we most wanted her to become was someone who was inquisitive and wasn't afraid to take chances and was willing to go out and get dirty and do things that helped other people as well. On the right is some shorebirds that just give you a sort of a view of things go all around in nature without our knowledge. And if you can spend time and get a telephoto that works quite well, you can share it with others. There are some suggestions and rules, And they're more about how your brain works, that works in terms of a lot of observation, and certainly in photography and painting and stuff. And that's the rule of, well, the most important one, and it's famous, is the rule of thirds. If you divide any picture or observation in three each way, like horizontal and vertical, and you put the subject matter in those places, your eyes will stay with it and will not wander around. Whereas if you put the subject matter right in the middle, like we do in a lot of our family portraits and stuff, your eyes aren't that interested. Things don't look as real. And that works in our brain. And that's because we don't like to look at things right in the center, even though we take pictures that way. Taking pictures and what you see are two totally different things. How many people have taken a picture of a bird in the sky and said, that's not, I mean, it looked so close when I took it, but now it's just a dot in the distance, and that's your brain fooling you. So when you see something like this, where there's a tiny gem in one little corner using that rule of thirds, but also some speck of something that's different than all the rest. In this case, a yellow kayak on Glenmore Reservoir. People also seem to gravitate to the numbers 3 and 5s. I don't know why, but they do. And so these turtles are more appealing than if there was whole groups of them on there. And in this case, a very ordinary picture, normally I wouldn't even show it, but because there's 3 trees there, it makes it a little more interesting, and your eyes tend to stay on that a bit more. Same with 5s, we're very similar. 3s and 5s are some of the best number cultures you can use. And S-shaped lines are much more appealing than straight lines in most cases. Color also makes our brain more excited, especially if they're bright or they show up against something that is a little less colorful, or if it's a dark against light or light against dark. Those things all attract our attention, make us want to spend more time on it. Points of interest are really quite important. Where do your eyes go? In this case, you see actually the light on the top of the heron's head than on the eye, because the eye is darker against a dark background, but the white on the top of the bill and the head get your attention far more, as do the lines that you follow. And then I told you all these rules, but then sometimes you look at something and it's just really interesting. Now, we were at the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver, and they had filled a number of the ponds with these cranberries. And so I just thought it was a really interesting picture, even though that doesn't really have much of a point of view or a rule of thirds or contrasts or any of the things that I say that you should do. Focus is another one. It can work both ways, out of focus or in focus. But in this case, this flower has much nicer raindrops on it and the stamens, etc., that really attract your attention. Or what if things are out of focus? In this case, the flowers are enhanced because of the falls in the background, which is at Butcher Gardens, by the way. Following the lines is fun. When you are looking at most scenes, your eyes follow those lines. And in my case, what I saw was this line going here, going back this way, went around this way, and it comes to your center of interest, which is this small, tiny little window, which it's not even probably a 50th of the picture, but your eye stays there once you finally get to it. Portraits are important too, especially if you're interested in behaviors and stuff that watching a bird watch for predators or watching for people being too close. This is a violet-crowned hummingbird down in Arizona this year. also waiting to take a nice photograph or a portrait or an action shot is so important. In this case, it's one of my favorite pictures of this young cedar waxwing looking to eat some bugs. And even if he wasn't bending over, it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting a picture in my mind. An important thing too is in this case, I love the stillness and the tininess of the deer, these mule deer riding on stone. And a very simple picture. It's very silent. You can tell they're worried about what's going on. It's early in the morning and they don't know what this person is doing, looking down, looking up at them from the campground or wherever it was. They're very nervous. They could run if I raised my hand. And I just thought it was a very effective picture. Is it better than this one? This one is full of action. It also is a mule deer, this time in Waterton, and it's full of noise and clatter and violence and danger. They're very unaware of the cameraman or the camera person, me. And so two very different images of the same species. So which is the better photo in your opinion? And more importantly, which one shows you? And in this case, I took the idea of it, and now that I look back at it, they both are. We have timidness and we have aggressiveness. We have shyness and we have not even thinking about anything else in our activities. And that happens to us every day. And recognizing that as us and how to portray it on an image, or even to see it out there in the world, is really important. It's also really important to break those rules. Now, I led tours for a few years into Mount Assiniboine with Brian Keating of the zoo. He was at the zoo at that point, and we got up early morning. I don't even remember how early, but the sun was just coming up, and everybody would take a picture of Mount Assiniboine. But what I thought was interesting was the reflection and the lines in this one. And we even had a guy that was dressed in Kodachrome red run over to the other side of the picture to use that rule of thirds. So your eyes go from different parts of the picture right to that red color. Sometimes we don't even think about the different rules, and they just become more natural as we observe and we see, but that's our brain doing that for us. And would you see this picture of this red person if it was a tiny little person in blue right in the middle of the picture? Probably not. And yet, how small is he in the picture? I like this one because they're all taken the same, pretty much the same time, within 5 minutes of each other at the same place at Pekaka Falls and just west of the city. And it was a beautiful time, and it was really nice to see. But you can see images in everything you look at, no matter where you are in the, I'll just make sure I'm not going too long. Oh, I am. But it's a great chance to try different things and to see different images. Even if you don't take pictures, try that whenever you're at some place. It's pretty remarkable. This photograph is not mine, it's my wife's, Ellen Gasser, and she took this one, and it's been one of the most meaningful pictures for me because of my interest in saving wildlife through habitat preservation and that. And who can't look at a family of grizzlies walking across the snow at Bow Summit? It just has that black and white image, makes it really stark and reminds us of how important nature is. But I can change your view on what you're seeing when I tell you the next year all 3 of these grizzlies were dead from being hit by cars. And did you notice how your thoughts changed as you saw them and you heard the story? And that's what art does. If you can see things that you want to tell and how to do it, it can really make a difference on how you train your own brain. And knowing that both sad and harsh, or sad and happiness can exist at the same time. Hard and soft can also exist. And another sort of sad story is this guy. It's a looper moth that we found in Vancouver last year when it was so hot in the summer. These were feeding on all the cedars and killing off cedars because of the increased amount of heat. They were hugely impactful as a species there, and it really hurt a lot of the conifer trees. But what I found was interesting when I looked at the picture, I unfortunately didn't think about it when I took it, but look, doesn't it look like almost a witch with, or not even just a witch, but something with its face on the right-hand side and a cloak all around it. But humor is important too after those last two pictures. And there's always chances to see these no matter where you go. You just have to have that humor in your thoughts and what it is, and allow yourself to see the humor. So often we see things so seriously, like how can I get that picture the best I can? But really watching them and watch the amusement, what makes it funny to you? In this case, this monster mushroom that it was having trouble getting up a tree and was sitting on a bench at Fish Creek. Or the satisfied smile on a seal. Where's Waldo? I'll give you a second to see if you can find Waldo in this picture. Anyone see him down in the lower right-hand corner? The Barrow's golden eye amongst all the surf stoters. The different types of lighting that you can learn, whether you're doing, again, photography or painting or whatever, is very important. And I was with Brian Keating, and he saw this, and his favorite name for this plant was hippies on a stick. But the interesting thing about it is that when you backlight something, you see real nice textures and you lose color. Whether you're at a zoo or out in the wild, if you get that backlight, you can see the hairs on this, sorry, chinny chin here, but as well as on the horns and the ears, and it just makes that texture the important part, but it really dulls out colors. Whereas if you take front lighting over your back, over your shoulder at something, which everybody tells you to do, it brings out colors, but not the detail, not the textures. And so in this case, I also wanted to say, it's really important to watch for things that aren't paying attention to you. In this case is a little bit backlighting and a little bit side lighting. So you get a mixture of the textures as well as the colors. Perspective is a really important thing in photography. And I like this one. This is a Natal's cottontail from down at Riding on Stone. It's actually a true rabbit and not a hare. And it's, what I did with this is get down as low as I can, close to the ground, which isn't easy in this shape I was in, but to get it at face level. So many people take pictures of wildlife looking down or looking up, but it doesn't give the perspective of who they are. Personality is so important sometimes. This little ruby crown kinglet was ready to take me on my scooter. Watching personalities is so critical to good photography and to getting the images that you want. We so often want to just take our first picture and hope that's good enough. But the more you can wait, sure, you lose many, many pictures, and I've lost thousands and thousands of good pictures trying to get that perfect image. If you take the picture and he's gone, he say flies because of the click, you won't get the picture anyway. So the more important thing is to watch the critter or the plant or whatever, and let the time take you to where you want to be. And wherever you are and whenever you are, there's always something. In this case, a little flower where a bee came in and started feeding. And as you all know, these things can become very important part in advocating positions. The image of 5 a.m. at Dinosaur Provincial Park, where the mist started growing up out of the ground and worked with the dark colors of the trees, makes getting up in the morning really important, or late at night. Bad weather, good weather, doesn't really matter. If you're indoors, one of the things, I'm not religious, but one of the things I enjoy the most are stained glass windows. I just love the beauty of them, looking for the colors. And more importantly, in this case, I really love the reflection on the stone. Spending time with your subject will teach you more about that individual than anything. Whether you're a wedding photographer or whether you're a bird photographer, keeping an eye on what they're doing and what they're trying to get and living their life as opposed to just something sitting there with his face staring at you. Although sometimes face staring at you is kind of neat. In this case, two deer at Carburn Park or a Canada goose at Frank Lake. One of my interests early on in photography has been Robert Bateman. And he once said in the lecture I was at, he said, I never do realistic drawings. Every drawing, every painting or drawing that I do is a representation of something. And he had a picture, I think it was of a snow leopard maybe, sitting up on a cliff overlooking the world. And he said, I took that with an idea that it was like a cannon sitting on the rock. I took this one for the same reason, only it's a grasshopper sitting on a rock, but he's still standing out protecting his area. Exploring places you wouldn't normally go really improves your chances of pictures. We took a road just outside of Nanaimo where it was a gravel road and I wouldn't normally want to go down it, but it just had a feel to it. And so we went down and we had this beautiful moss covered trees. Without going down that road, we wouldn't have observed and photographed. But the most important part is the observation, because that goes in your brain and stays with you. Special things can be done too. As many of you know, American coots aren't ducks, and they don't have regular web feet that waterfowl have. They have these little lobes around their toes, sort of in between, but are very much more closely related to cranes than they are to waterfowl. Look carefully around you because you never know when you're going to see something. In this case, we saw quite a few spider webs, of course, in the Kananaskis Valley area, but how was I going to take it so that it had an impression? And what I did was I waited until there was shadow behind, or I moved around until there was full shadow behind it. And that really brought out the light that was coming down from the forest. So look carefully around you no matter what. Explore places you don't go. In this case is a cave in Cuba, and we saw these two bats sitting there. They're a type of fruit-eating bat, and without going in that cave, we wouldn't have seen them. But do it carefully. You never know what's out there too. Balance is such an incredible, important thing. Watching colors and mists and off, none of this is really white. It's all different shades of blue. And because it is all different, there's certain levels of balance to it. So waiting, even when you take a picture of a scene out there, is really critical. When I talked to you before about looking behind or looking beside you, I took a photography course in Kananaskis, well, in Calgary, and we went on a field trip to Kananaskis. And the whole group, there was about 20 or 30 of us, the whole group was watching this big, huge elk buck. And it had monster antlers and some of the bigger ones we saw. But to the side, I looked, and here were these strawberries with this small amount of frost all around the outside. And I love this much better than the photograph of the elk, because it was really special. That took me doing something different to get what I wanted. And that counts with you guys too, whether you're doing photography or just observing. The more you look sideways, the more you're going to see. The less you get focused so totally in on something because everybody else is doing it, you tend to lose out. Knowing what you're trying to observe or to take in or photograph or paint or do music about is important. And one of the things I determined about the importance of this picture, the coolness of this picture, wasn't the crossbill sitting in a feeder. It's that one little sunflower seed that's dropping out of his mouth, and it makes a balance for the whole photograph. Sometimes the thing that makes the biggest difference to you is what it is on the side. So using all kinds of different techniques like eyes and rules of thirds and color and personality and feelings, all can be put into photographs or art or observation. And if you know you're doing it mentally, you can get yourself feeling so much better about the world. You're no longer controlled by the TV or your own depression or those kinds of things. It made a huge difference in my wanting to learn to walk again. I spent my first 30 years or 40 years of my career spending time out in nature, and to be robbed of that opportunity to get out was so devastating. I didn't think I would survive. But the chances of having first cars and then a walker and then a scooter has changed my life to the point where I'm happier than I've ever been. Knowing what's important to you when you take pictures of people is important too. Don't just take pictures of people standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Watch what the people you're taking are doing and get them with their personality. This is my wife and my daughter watching the waves out in west of Souk in BC. Or the eyes and the beauty of a baby great horned owl looking at us in a blind across the way and seeing him. All the rest are looking one way, but he's looking sideways. Watching for cultural experiences that aren't normal for you and what you normally take pictures of. We were in Cuba at this time, and we just saw this on one of the large squares that they had. Remember, though, while you're doing all of that, think of your rules sometimes. Know what you like. In my case, I love stained glass windows, even if they're very, very subtle, and just the slightest of blue against all this gray and black and white. Just that slight blue keeps your attention. But be ready wherever you are. If you don't have your camera, you miss the winter plumage common loon at Waterton Lakes. And with it blowing as hard as it did, it was difficult to get this photograph. And it's just kind of fun to try to do it. Or go into places when it isn't so pleasant, like Jasper last year during the fires. It really made a difference in terms of the picture itself, and it's one of my favorite pictures of Jasper. The art, always seeing, is the art itself. Always looking. And I mentioned to a few people that when I deal with Alberta Health Services, is if you're riding on a bus, look at the signs that are out there. If you're riding in a car, watch people. Even if you think it's the most boring, watch what the trees and all the colors change as you drive to Vancouver, or any of those kinds of things. There's every moment that exists in time can be observed. And that's a really critical thought. And it made me lots better. And it's been done over time, whether it's people portraying art back in the times of carving and making totem poles, or Emily Carr seeing those totem poles and painting her own images of it as she saw, or me taking both those pictures and knowing how it influenced me. All of those are different people at different times, different centuries doing art and showing something that they believe in. You are very much an artist. Every single person out there is an artist. But if you only let yourself see, and you only let yourself look to the side and stop looking where everybody else is. One of the things of organized bird watching I have trouble with is everybody's looking for the same things. And it's really important for learning and stuff, but it's also really important to have trust in yourself and to be able to identify things as you see them, or to be able to even watch if you don't know what they are. And then when you really get to it and you have to stay indoors, try playing on your computer. In this case, these are two trees that overlook the glacier at the end of Lake Louise. And I just saw the picture and they were kind of neat, and they made really nice pictures, but I decided to try some computer work. One day I was walking around Stanley Park, and when I was at not feeling well, I had got COVID while I was in Vancouver, and just this year, and I saw this lady going out and sitting on a rock watching this great blue heron in the distance. And I thought it was so cool. And I thought it was the exact message of this this presentation is watch and also maybe be watched, but or photographed. But I then decided to play around with it too. And how could I make it an image of what represents where I'm at now as opposed to 30 years ago? This is one of the last pictures, but how are we for time? Good. I have a bit of a story to tell of this one, or something that shaped me even before I did much photography, although I did take this picture. Myself and a friend were exploring, going down to California, just out of, I think, university or high school or something like that. And we drove down along the Pacific Ocean, and we saw, I had been looking at some of the California stuff and Oregon stuff on National Geographics. And I saw a small little photograph of something called Proxy Creek Falls, or my friend did, I can't remember. But we decided we wanted to find it. So we looked everywhere for it. We asked at different restaurants and gas stations and anywhere, museums or visitor centers. We tried everywhere to find it, and we couldn't find it. But we loved the kind of the cottony billowing water. Well, we were about to give up, and we decided to take a trip east of where it was, which was the town of Eugene, Oregon. And we drove a bit, and we had looked around there too, asking again, but nobody knew it. We pulled into this really grimy old, I guess it was a service station, but everything was discolored because of oil and stuff like that. And there was two guys sitting in chairs, sort of classic picture of the gas station. And we asked them if he knew where Proxy Creek Falls were, and we told them about the National Geographic, and we were really, really interested in finding it. They kind of chuckled and said, no, we don't know where that is, but we have a falls if you just go up a quarter of a mile behind our gas station and just follow the trail up there, and we have a pretty nice set of falls there. And lo and behold, when we got there, it was Proxy Creek Falls. And that is, to me, some of the meaning I take most of in terms of photography. and the opportunity to drive and try to find stuff that you really want to see got me into photography. And I did take this at the time, and with a much poorer camera than I have now. So anyone can do it. We now have phones that are probably better than my large camera. We have chances we can all spend some time and paint or draw or sculpt or sing or play guitar or just think about what we see. That story stays the same no matter what. And it was one of the things that got me going. And now I try to bring that to other people as well, no matter how sick or infirmed or how you feel. There's always pictures on the walls, and there's always stuff on the phones and that kind of thing, calendars that people look at, postcards. There's any number of ways to observe, and it only happens if you choose to do it. So thanks for the having me here and the patience to sit through my talking all the time. Most of the photos were mine except my wife's. And so I just wanted to say again, thanks. And Nature Calgary has always meant a lot to me. They spent more time helping to save these areas. I just feel like I kind of supported them as well. And so it has been a very important time for me and helped me grow into what I am now. And as I said, I'm far more pleased with who I am than I was back then.
Well, thanks a lot there, Dave. That was a fantastic presentation. And the art of seeing, what a wonderful way to get people enthralled with getting out and looking, as you say, and maybe once in a while capturing it either, well, certainly with your mind, but perhaps with whatever art you can put to paper or to film, or I guess it's all digital, some of that stuff now is. So
anything.
yeah, no, it's fabulous. Certainly wants me to get out there with my camera and maybe start exploring a bit more than what I've done in the past.
Although you explore quite a bit, so
yeah, much appreciated there, Dave. So for those who might have a question to Dave, if you want to throw it into the chat, then I can relay it to Dave, and then he'll be able to help you out with whatever question you might have. I would say off the bat, I guess for me, what is your major camera that you use? Do you have like your favorite little setup to use?
we have a few. I have a few different ones, but I mostly use one now, which is an extremely heavy camera. It's a Nikon P1000, which has a super zoom, but it also does wide angle and stuff. But because I mostly stick to my scooter, I can't carry a lot of stuff, and I can't be changing lenses and stuff. However, I can use this one on a monopod and take the pictures that I want. It just really makes a huge difference to have the versatility. It's a little darker than some of the fancy new cameras that are out there, but it's one that I can use based on my situation.
That sounds great. I was wondering when you were thinking about trying to get low to see your cottontail rabbit, do you have a tilt screen on your camera?
I
in some
do.
ways? Yeah.
I do, and that works whether you're up above it or below it. And I use that quite often, and I find that's important. But I also want, as you might guess, I want to really mention it isn't about the camera. It's not about whether the quality is there. It helps, but the more important thing is what do you do with your time when you're with a subject. But I certainly have one that has a tilt screen, and it makes all the difference for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to lay on the ground and get up again. I can lay on the ground, but I'll never get up again.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of us having trouble getting up as well as we get a little bit more silver in the hair. So no, that's great.
Yeah.
What else is going
to like me? So
yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, there was a question about your book, on Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, and whether that's available locally, or is it something that somebody, is it like a library or something, or?
it's it's available in a couple of places. I can't think of where right now, but what I would like to do is donate a box of them to the Field Naturalists, and you guys can sell them for yourself and use the money for donating to whatever you like. And I'd
Hmm.
be happy to give you a couple boxes. So
Yeah, that'd be
that
great.
members can get it there. So
Yeah.
however you want to do it, whether you want to sell it or give it away or whatever, it's
Yeah, no,
okay.
that's a fabulous offer. Yeah, we'll take you up on that. You know, when we have some displays or stuff that we're doing, it would be very well received, I'm sure, by people who might
It's
be.
quite dated. It's back like when I was there. So uh, keep that in mind. The interpretive center wasn't there, but the feeling is still there.
Then that's the important thing. The feeling was there, the history of the place,
Yeah.
and the flow of life that goes through there from season to season is also there as well. So that, yeah. There's one question. Did you give this presentation to Alberta Health Services employees for them to develop a program for their patients?
That's what I'm starting to do now is I'm working with the volunteer program to start. I started out doing Alberta mental health because that's where I was at the time I started getting with the depression from the illness. But now I'm looking at pursuing a bit more of that way. And I'm currently volunteering with Alberta Health Services, and it just sort of in talks right now. So it's interesting that you say that, but it was one of the things that I wanted to present to naturalists as well.
Hmm. Yeah, certainly a great natural talk, as well as for people who are looking for your guidance as to how to improve their situation as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and we all get sick and we all feel bad, and
mhm.
it happens to every one of us, but how we react makes such a difference. And I learned that through the hard way. It wasn't that I was always taking this approach, but I learned a lot growing through nature to be able to use it when I lost a lot of my abilities.
For sure. I just got a note in the chat. It's just from Elizabeth. Wanted to have you ensure that you see her comments in the chat. I don't see them directly, so I don't know if she's directed it actually to you or. But anyways, yeah.
Elizabeth, yes, I did.
Did you? Okay, good, great.
Yeah, I I I wanted to also say that I recognize so many people here, and it brings me back a lot to when we worked together and spent time and enjoyed things together, and some volunteers and some friends and some people I know more lately. But I just wanted to thank you all, and don't ever think that what a group like Nature Calgary can do, or Nature Alberta, or whoever. Um, it makes a ton of difference. Even if you just change one person's thought for a minute, uh, it can make a difference when someone looks at something to vote on, or needing help or whatever. And that's in no matter what you do, it can make a difference.
Mhm. Well said there, Dave. Well said for sure. And certain Nature Calgary, we're starting to get a little bit more active, I suppose, in that advocacy kind of role. So, like with the Ricardo Ranch project that's going ahead with the city, we're
Yeah.
concerned about the welfare of the great blue herons, for example, in the banks walls there. We're concerned about Nose Creek and the industrial development that might take place there. So we are starting to get a little bit more active that way, as Nature Calgary was, or Field Naturalist Society was, when it first got going back in the well, certainly in the early late 60s into early 70s. I think
Yeah,
a group like that was really important to get the city to realize the importance of our natural areas. So
for sure.
whether we do it as a group or as individuals, reach out to your politician, your counselor, and just say, hey, this area is important. We need to protect it.
And that is critically important. As you know, I spent a lot of time at that. But there's also a real importance to know that it isn't just about advocacy, it's about experience, and it's about learning it yourself and pushing yourself to see those things, and helping your friends or family, or people you don't even know to experience it as well. People will fight far harder when they know, say, if Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, if they knew what issues were going on there, and it was their favorite place to go, and they know the beauty of it, that's when you start really getting people to that. And I wanted to also thank Elizabeth for that. I remember it well, and I just, thanks very much.
Perfect. One question just came up. How many good birding locations in Calgary are accessible by a scooter or a wheelchair?
Good question. And I've been learning a lot of places. The scooter I have, the light one that I use in the summer, fall, and spring, can go on most hard gravel or paved areas. Certainly much better to be paved from my experience use. I know there used to be a lot of politics over that, but I also find that giving people more access, as long as it can be done safely. Like for instance, when we were working with Griffiths Woods, we made sure no trails were put anywhere where there wasn't previously a gravel road or a dirt road through it. So we didn't have to take out any native vegetation. But I like any kinds. The only ones I can't use are things like uh, what's it called? Wood chips, which we used to do at Inglewood.
Right.
And pavement makes it so easy, especially if someone, I don't just think about the person in the wheelchair, but the person pushing them. And getting out and getting access is really important. And that's one of the reasons I fought so hard for Calgary's natural areas and not so much as other places, was that people didn't realize just how important it is to people to have a better society. And if you believe that it wasn't important even to commercial people, watch house prices near natural areas. There's been plenty of research showing that the closer you are to a ravine, the higher the price goes up for your house. So don't ever believe that it isn't important or that it's just minor. We are being taught to believe that by a lot of people, but it's not always true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got lots of
Advocacy is important too.
Yeah.
But there's far more to life than advocacy too. So living
mhm.
your life makes you so much better as an explorer and an interpreter.
For sure, for sure. I just thought I'd say there, Dave, there's lots of great comments about your presentation.
Oh, thank you. I
Lots
can
of
see them, and
yeah,
I was really pleased to do this. I feel like I'm coming back into the group with this, so I will try to spend more time. I really appreciated what it did for me.
for
And,
sure. We welcome you with open arms there, Dave.
thank you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot there, Dave.
Thank you.
Just this is a quick reminder again for those. We will have our speaker series again in October. That's October the 19th. And we'll have Kimberly Pearson from Waterton Park, who'll be talking about the Keno fire and the aftermath of the Keno fire, and perhaps touch on a little bit about volunteer opportunities as well. So that's something to look forward to on October 19th. Other than that, I very much thank you for, yes,
Could I
Dave.
just interrupt for 1
Sure,
minute?
go ahead.
I wanted to say hi to Ina, who also did a huge amount of work for natural areas in our group, and I didn't mention that earlier, and I just wanted to let her know that how much I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, yes, I know Ina as well, and you're right, absolutely right. She was a starring person in our protecting our natural areas. So, anyways, I think that'll we'll end our meeting at that point, and I certainly again appreciate Dave for all his insight on how to get out there and actually see what we should be seeing and see what we should be looking for, and enjoying that natural world that we're all so blessed to have within our area. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to receiving you guys again on October the 19th. So take care, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you.